Welcome to This Explainer. I want you to go ahead and picture your backyard for a second. You're standing there, looking at the grass, the fence, maybe a tree or two, and you're probably thinking, this is mine. I own it, right? But beneath the surface of that dirt lies a massive, invisible, and frankly fascinating legal architecture that dictates exactly what owning it actually means in the eyes of the law. Today, we're going to expose that hidden framework governing our land, our resources, and our stuff. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's a quick roadmap of what we're covering today. First, we'll define property. Then we'll look at the power of ownership. After that, we'll get into sharing and losing control. And finally, we'll cover exactly how you acquire ownership.
All right, Section 1, the definition of property. What actually counts as property?
Legally speaking, all things that can be appropriated fall into two main buckets: immovable and movable. Immovable property is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's real property, either by its very nature or by incorporation. We're talking about your actual house, the land it sits on, roads, and even things deeply attached to the ground, like trees or heavy statues. Movable property, on the other hand, includes transportable items. Your lawnmower? That's movable property. But the law gets incredibly specific here. Did you know that forces of nature brought under control by science, like harnessed electricity, are also officially legally categorized as movable property? Kind of wild, right? Now, what about the government? Let's look at how the state categorizes its own holdings, because not all government property is treated the same way. On one side, we have property of public dominion. These are things intended for public use. Think of the public roads you drive on, canals, shores, or properties developed for national wealth. On the flip side, we have patrimonial property. This is the state's privately held property that isn't intended for public use or public service. It's basically just the state acting like a private entity, holding on to its own assets, exactly like you or me. This public versus private distinction gets incredibly detailed, especially when we start looking at water resources. Let's anchor this right back to our backyard analogy. If rain falls from the sky and lands in your yard, or if a continuous spring naturally bubbles up entirely within your private land boundaries, those are private waters. They belong to you. But if a natural river runs right through your land, or there's a subterranean stream down below, that flowing water is of public dominion. You might own the banks, but the water itself, that belongs to the state.
Moving right along to Section 2, the power of ownership. Let's talk about the legal superpowers you get when you own something.
So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding the fundamental difference between real rights and personal rights. When you hold the deed to your backyard, you have a real right. A real right is a power that gives you financial or economic advantages over a specific thing, and here's the kicker. It is enforceable against the whole world. Literally everyone on Earth has to respect your ownership. A personal right, on the other hand, is just the power to demand something from a specific person, like when you sign a contract with a roofer. Ownership of property? That is the ultimate real right. But what does ownership actually let you do? Well, the law defines ownership with very specific attributes. First step is justus bondendi, which simply translates to your right to dispose of the property. You can sell it, you can donate it, or you can literally just throw it away. Then there's jus utendi, your right to simply use it. And jus fruendi, your right to enjoy the fruits or profits it generates. But there is a massive legal consequence built into all of this. You have all these rights, provided you don't make use of your property in a way that injures the rights of a third person. So you can absolutely dig a hole in your yard, but you can't dig a hole so deep that it ruins your neighbor's foundation. Now, let's say someone tries to take your property. You actually have a specific legal menu for recovering it. If someone can test your actual ownership of real property, you'd use an auction reivindicatoria to recover it. If the dispute is just a plenary action about who has the better right to possess it right now, you'd use an auction publiciana. And if someone physically forces their way onto your land, you have summary actions for forcible entry called auction interdictale to swiftly recover your material physical possession. But what if someone simply files a fake deed claiming they own your house? That's where a really interesting tool called quieting of title comes in. If there's an instrument, record, or claim floating around out there that looks apparently valid but is truly invalid, it creates what the law calls a cloud on your title. This specific action allows you to legally wipe away those false claims and aggressively protect your pristine official record of ownership. All right, Section 3, sharing and control. What exactly happens when these rights overlap or get messy? Let's group these rules by looking at three major ownership nuances. First is accession. By the right of accession, you automatically own everything produced by or naturally attached to your property. So, if an apple tree naturally grows in your yard, those apples are yours. Second is co-ownership. This happens when an undivided thing belongs to different people, meaning you all proportionally share both the benefits and the charges of the property. And third is possession. Simply holding a thing in your hand or materially occupying it is possession. But remember, mere possession isn't true ownership. In fact, you can lose possession just by abandoning the item, or if someone else holds it for more than a year. Which brings us to a really fascinating legal puzzle that tests how these rights can be sliced up. Let me ask you this. Can you own the apples, but not the orchard? Can you legally possess the fruits of a property without actually holding the deed to the land underneath it? The answer is a resounding yes. It happens through a mechanism called usufruct. Honestly, usufruct is basically the ultimate legal hack. It gives a person the right to enjoy someone else's property and take the fruits of it with one very strict obligation. You have to preserve its form and substance. So you get all the financial and physical benefits of using that orchard, but you don't own the underlying asset, and you definitely can't alter or destroy it. And this brilliantly illustrates another way rights can overlap: easements. An easement is a legally recognized encumbrance imposed on one immovable property, which is called the servient estate, for the benefit of another, the dominant estate. Going back to our backyard, if your neighbor has a driveway that legally crosses the corner of your lawn to reach the main road, that's a classic easement. It is completely inseparable from the estate itself. It can be acquired by title or a 10-year prescription. And it's only extinguished by specific events, like a merger of the properties or 10 solid years of non-use. Basically, the dominant estate gets to use it, and the servient estate simply cannot impair that use. Finally, Section 4. How to acquire ownership. How does property actually change hands? Well, the law recognizes several specific modes of acquisition. First up is occupation. This is claiming things that literally have no owner, like catching wild animals or pulling a hidden treasure from the earth. But here's a massive quirk in the law. You can acquire treasure just by finding it, but you can never legally acquire a piece of land through mere occupation. Then there's tradition, which is the legal transfer of ownership as a consequence of contracts, like a sale or a barter, and donation, a gratuitous gift. But interestingly, if you want to donate immovable property, like giving someone a house, the law strictly requires it to be done in a public document for it to be legally valid. And that brings us to the timeline of prescription. This is wild because it outlines how the sheer passage of time legally transforms possession into absolute ownership. So at year 0, material possession begins. After just 1 year, the original possessor actually legally loses physical possession. Now, if the new possessor is acting in good faith with a just title, the law grants them ordinary acquisitive prescription after 10 years, meaning they officially become the legal owner. But through continuous, uninterrupted adverse possession, extraordinary acquisitive prescription kicks in at 30 years. That means after 3 decades of uninterrupted possession, the ownership legally transfers entirely, regardless of good faith. So, we've peeled back the layers on everything from wild animals to subterranean rivers, from mere possession to absolute, world-enforceable rights. We've seen how the state, your neighbors, and the sheer passage of time can fundamentally alter your dominion. So the next time you step outside, look around your property, and think about the complex web of real rights and legal modifiers hovering invisibly in the air. Ask yourself, so, who really owns the ground beneath your feet?